What are some of the not so obvious things that people do that disrupt their sleep quality?
I think the two things would be honestly the way people think about sleep would be number one, like far above anything else. I think number two would probably be hydration strategy, which people don't often link with sleep. So the first one, I think people just when they start to have issues with sleep, they think about it, they worry about it, they try to buy supplements and fixes and hacks, and the problem is no one's associating like the psychological side of sleep. And sleep truly needs to be a thing that's peaceful and restful. And when anytime you're bringing stress into the bedroom, you're going to have an issue. And so I think that people just need to give themselves some grace, right? There's going to be times you don't sleep well. You're going to be going through things in life that don't allow you to fall asleep right away, and you're going to be fine. There's going to be times when you have to pull an all-nighter for whatever reason. So just relax. Don't overthink it. You're never going to outstress your way into sleeping better, right? So no more attention doesn't always mean better. And then the second piece is I think hydration plays a huge part in the sense of like people are aware they need to be hydrated. They're trying to get their fluid intake. A lot of people are working throughout the day, so they try to make up for a lot of that at night when they have downtime. And one of the main reasons people wake up throughout the middle of the night is to go to the bathroom. Which is not uncommon to go to the bathroom, but it's like when it's 4 or 5 times because you're trying to make up for this lack of hydration during the day, all of a sudden that becomes an issue. So I think those two things are probably the things I hear about the most that people don't often think of.
And when it comes to like preparing your mind for sleep, like what are some of the things that you do every single night,
Yeah.
day in and day out, that help get your mind prepared for a restful night of sleep?
I think it starts with some reflection. I think first off, honestly, to have the best peace of mind, I think having purpose in what you're doing in life is really where to start. Like, when you think about people who are very stressed, or anytime I've been stressed, when there's not a clear purpose and there's also not a clear path from like what you think is your potential and where you're at, there seems to be a lot of stress. So there's kind of a foundational, deep thinking answer. But beyond that, in more short term, I think reflecting on things that truly do bring you peace, things you enjoy, things that represent winding down, and then separating those things, or at least some of those feelings, from the bedroom to the living space, right? So anything that brings stress, or in any sense, even if like if it's your phone, that's attached to a lot of feelings. So even if you're in bed and you're only texting friends or family or looking up things that you really enjoy, there's still a link there, a psychological link. So keeping the stuff that causes you stress out of the bedroom and making that a sacred space is a really good place to start. And then, from a physiological perspective, I think that light is you've probably heard that, but light, creating a gradient from living space to bedroom is huge. Like we want to separate the two, but I don't think a lot of people think about their nighttime lighting in their living space as something they should consider. So you really want to gradual taper down of light from the 5 or 6 p.m. to bedtime, not like all the lights are on in my living space and then go to my bedroom. So something I love is using candles. I mean, candles emit a very low amount of energy. I think it obviously is relaxing. It kind of sets the vibe and allows you to create a routine that is enjoyable, and you don't even really realize you're like focusing on sleep, but it does make a big difference.
And what are some of the things that like you do that like help you kind of instantly like reduce stress? Because a lot of times, I mean, I know you have a family, you got kids, it's like, sometimes stuff happens like after dinner that you have no control over. Like, how do you calm yourself down before you go to bed?
Yeah, I mean, the quickest way to calm yourself down is breathing, right? So I think being intentional with your breathing and bringing focus to your breathing is, I mean, that's really the only way to instantaneously calm your nervous system down. When you think about all the stuff out there, everything else takes time, and it's kind of subjective. But your breathing is the steering wheel to your nervous system, right? So if you can focus on long, slow exhales, you will calm down whether you like it or not. You could be the most stressed in the world, but if you now, it's not easy to do in the moment, but if you can do that, you'll calm down. So I think bringing intention to your breathing is really the first place to start. Like that's why the mouth tape I think is powerful, is because it is a passive way to do that. I think breathing, like any therapist out there will recommend breathing. One of the first things that's recommended, so many professions, doctors, MDs, all this different stuff, but the compliance rate and the follow through rate of breathing is relatively low. It takes a lot of thought, effort. I think people are a little weary or not as bought into it as they should be. The mouth tape is just a passive way to really slow your breathing and allow your body to calm down. And I actually think the nervous system side of things, where a lot of people find the benefit, is they're actually, for the first time, calming their breathing down and down regulating their nervous system, just because of the amount of stress people have. But beyond that, what do? I mean, the heat before bed. Like I love the sauna. Like sauna is a huge part of my life, and that's something I've always been drawn to it from a calming perspective, just because I feel like it is like a bubble to the world, and it calms me down. Just feels like all the problems are outside the sauna, and so I usually do that with my wife, and that's probably the biggest staple in my nighttime ritual that it doesn't really waver, except if I'm traveling.
I definitely want to get back into talking about sleep and talk more about like mouth tape and stuff. But first, like we love talking about reinvention on the podcast. You're a professional athlete, played at the highest level, and I would imagine it's like tough to like let go of those dreams, especially when you work so hard and you're so close to like really really making it. Like, what was that process like of finally like letting that go and then deciding
You
to go a different
know,
direction?
it it wasn't as painful like as most in the short term, I think, because like I walked down at Michigan State, so I was already exceeding my own expectations coming in there. I really felt like, looking back in my career, I really do feel like I got everything I could have out of it. There wasn't much left. I could have probably hung on for a little bit and bounced around, but I knew my limits and my body was pretty banged up. So I think in the short term, it wasn't like I had, the vision of playing 12 years in the NFL and being a Pro Bowler. But the other thing that happened too is I met my wife, and she had gotten sick at her third Olympic trials, didn't make the team for the first time, and so there was a little bit of this caretaking where I felt like I had to be this foundation, which was good because it kind of distracted me from my own issues. But I think in the long term, it came out a little later, down the road. That whole purpose side of things became a challenge, and I think that I gained weight, and it was going through some stuff of just what is my purpose? What am I driven by beyond sport? Because sport's like such a finite, like everything goes into that. It's very clear what makes you better, and there's just so many support systems. It's just the most clear path. I think there's always subjectivity, but it's like if I do all these things off the field, it's going to make me better, and it's really nice to have something kind of what you put into it, you get out of it. And in life, it's not always like that, right? Like there's so many turns and luck, all this stuff. So I think that was a real challenge for me, is like for really, really figuring that out after, the transition and the identity piece wore off after I stopped playing. And it took some time. It was a slow trickle, but finally got there.
Yeah, I bet. And that's cool that you had that, like, I guess, unexpected blessing with Katie, getting sick and you having to take care of her because, like you said, it took a lot of like the emotional pain off of you and you're able to like leverage that to help her, which I think is obviously super stressful for both of you in the moment. But like long term, I'm sure you look back and like, wow, like I like skipped so much of the potential like heartache of leaving the
I
league.
think it came out in other ways, but for the most part, it was a blessing in disguise. And to be honest, it was her issues felt like such a bigger deal. It kind of put things in perspective. And like I said, I honestly could have continued to try to like bounce around free agency and do things, and I actually chose to take a step back. And that lifestyle after meeting Katie, I just didn't know if that was going to be the best thing or if I wanted that. And I think I made the right decision looking back.
And a lot of former NFL players, they have a hard time like, you know, improving their health. I mean, they put on a bunch of weight to become like a lineman, fullback, tight end, like these positions where it requires you to be like heavier. Um, what were some of the steps you took to like lose a bunch of weight and get healthier?
I mean, I really have to be intentional with it. I think I tried to gain weight for so long. Like now my body just wants to be heavy. It just seems like I'm constantly like, if I slip up for a couple of weeks, things go to a bad place. So honestly, what's been really life changing is I used to absolutely dread running. Like I hated it with a passion up until about 4 years ago. And I didn't know what I was doing with the running, right? So I started to actually learn how to run for distance and at a pace that I was comfortable with. I wasn't killing myself. Every time I went out to run as an athlete, it was punishment, or you just ran until you were tired, and I hated it. And when I started to learn running, one, from a mental perspective, I fell in love with just the clarity it brought me. And I run with no headphones like a crazy person, and just kind of think about stuff. But I feel so great afterwards. The other thing is too, just the efficiency. Like, yeah, I'm a big guy. I'm 240 pounds. Like, in an hour for me to burn that many calories and sweat that much, I love that feeling. It's very efficient. I can do it anywhere, traveling, hotel, doesn't matter. It's always available. And so it's been pretty life changing. It's been a really great way to manage, um, my fitness and all that. And also just the eating side of things. Like, I think the biggest thing I had to learn was, when I growing up, you just ate till you were full always, and I loved it. And it was like binging, basically. Like, you would just crush every restaurant I could go to, and that's how we based in high school and college, like what a good restaurant was by how much food you got. And then, so I think learning, like, so now, like, when I have a cheat meal, whatever you want to call it, like, it's not off the rails. And I think that was a big shift, because in football it was just like you just ate as much as you wanted all the time. And so learning kind of that intuition of when I'm hungry and when I'm not, and what's a normal amount of food, and slowing myself down. I think that, they seem pretty basic skills. And I used to actually preach these when I was like in the strength and conditioning world, but you don't really take a step back and assess yourself. And so there was some pretty base level learnings I found about myself, and it's really helped me to be consistent. I'd say over the last 5 years, I've been in a really good place.
What were like some of the things, like what really helped you like find purpose in life after leaving the league and after helping Katie get through what she went through?
It's a great question. I think, man, that's honestly, I think, what really great gave me great perspective was, we moved out around a lot, and I've taken some chances, and had some great experiences because I met Katie. If I didn't meet Katie, I wouldn't have probably had the courage to move around. And when you have a partner like that, it makes it a lot less scary to bounce around cities. And we lived in Miami, New York, Chicago, and been around a lot of people, met a lot of great people. And honestly, like, the community piece has been the biggest guidance. I think that we've been around so many situations and people that I really was able to gather the things I valued, the things that I felt good about, the people, types of people, and the types of things where when I did it or I was around it, I really felt that sense of purpose. And so I think, in a nutshell, it would be just the amount of experiences, or the amount of things we've experienced in a short amount of time, from moving around, has been really, really impactful, because it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know. And the other thing is, like, I think that sometimes, over the last 10 years, we were just chasing, whether it's money, career, or you don't really know what you're going after. And sometimes once you achieve some of that stuff, you actually have to do the most soul searching. I think money is actually something that, like, it always is there for a lot of people. So you always feel like you're chasing it. And once you get that, you'll be happy, right? So sometimes I think some of the most, I don't want to say tortured, but some of the most reflection happens when you actually achieve some goals, because you've told yourself you were going to be happy. Like, you're achieving things that you've convinced yourself or told yourself were going to make you happy when you achieve them. And all of a sudden you have to look yourself in the mirror and be like, am I happy now? Because I said I would be. And I think that happens. So I think it really clears things up. But I think a lot of people, actually, that is the point where they have to figure out who they are, because the thing that you're always chasing, all of a sudden, maybe you figure that out, or you have some good circumstances. That's not actually what it is. And so, um, I really, my parents are both teachers, and they are very selfless, giving people. And I think, that's something, doing what I'm doing now, as much as, yes, I have businesses, but I do love giving back. I love educating people, and nothing makes me happier than, like, getting messages about how people have changed their life and they feel better, and they're better parents, better athletes, whatever it is. So I think if my foundation is always helping others, and I think my parents instilled that in me, I think that really does drive my purpose. And if I'm helping other people, I can't see a circumstance where I don't feel like I have some sort of purpose in life.
Yeah, the arrival fallacy, I think they call it, like the trap, can be like, it's like double edged, right? Because I think in one aspect of it, like, it helps you because you're like, I never thought I could achieve this. What's next? Like, I'm sure for you, you're like, I never thought I could walk on at Michigan State. Well, what's next? Let me go play in the league. But then, like, eventually you hit a point where it's like, is this really like driving happiness for me? Am I actually, getting fulfillment from that? And it's tough.
It is hard, though, because I think that, when you say that, like it's hard to communicate because like what that's meaning that you're accomplishing a lot of your goals, and in a sense you're like, oh, this is getting old. Like that's not what it means, but it is. And like you're chasing these wins. And I think a lot of times, like if you were to tell me this 10 years ago, it's like, oh, it's easy for you to say because whatever, like it's hard to really put yourself in that perspective. So I think one of the most undervalued things in life is experience, and you can't skip steps. And so sometimes I'll go talk to kids or college athletes, and I try to explain some of this stuff. But honestly, I explain it enough where I think they can take some of it in. And my only hope is when they're going through those steps, they recognize that there's a purpose why they are going through it, because some things you just have to experience. And I don't think there's anything anyone could have told me 10 years ago that would have changed the way things went, if that makes sense.
Totally. And you're absolutely right. It's like when you're talking, sometimes like, yeah, it's easy for you to say, buddy, you've already like,
Yeah. Yeah. That's like,
made and lost money, or you've already like done all
it's
the,
kind of like when people are like, money doesn't buy happy. You see a billionaire, money doesn't buy happiness. And they're like, you think all this material stuff matters. Well, what they're saying is like 1,000,000% true. But when someone doesn't have that, they're not even going to let that sink in, because it's hard to even put yourself in that perspective.
Yeah, and I think the proper reframe is like, having $1 billion doesn't buy you happiness. I think because for certain people, like, yeah, if you don't have money, I remember there's times when my business was struggling years ago. I was like, man, I understand why people get super stressed out and have mental health issues when they have no money. Because I felt that like boot, like on my, I literally felt that pressure on my chest.
In a way, I think like, yeah, oh, dude, yeah, that is just living day to day like that is so difficult. But in a way, like that does give you a little bit of purpose, right? You're trying to provide, and I think that and you're trying to get through. So I think, let's say you continue to have success, like linear success, and all of a sudden that dissipates, then I think that's when people are left with that whoa moment where they're really reflecting on, okay, what does give me purpose? Because up until that point, you're trying to provide and take care of the things and the people that you love. And I think it becomes a pretty pivotal moment in someone's life.
I'm curious though, why did you end up like going down, like bringing this all together? Why did you end up going down the route of sleep? Like, what got you fascinated with that?
Yeah, so being a walk-on, like I always was obsessed with the performance side, and I was always doing research, learning. I was in kinesiology, health studies, and I just felt like I was trying to eke every ounce of performance out of myself, and so I loved it. And I thought I was going to want to go in the strength conditioning space, and I did. I thought I wanted to be a college strength conditioning coach because just the impact my strength coaches had on me, and I loved like that side of things. I probably loved the performance side more than actually football, the X's and O's, right? If I had to pick between the two. And so I went down that path. I started working at a place that trained like combine athletes. And then I started working at corporate gyms. And then I got to spend time with Dr. Jennifer Martin at UCLA, and it blew my mind. And this was almost 10 years ago. And at the time, no one was speaking on sleep, talking about sleep. And I was like, this is literally the foundation of health and wellness, performance, everything. And no one is speaking on it. So I just kind of became obsessed with it, because every time I would go talk about it or, spread knowledge or educate people, it would have such a profound impact, because it was like this gap. And I just went head in and started, just speaking to, more in the strength conditioning world, and then started companies. And now, from that evolves, sports teams. And then I'd always get asked about products, didn't have a good answer. And that was kind of the evolution. But, it came from the sense of, okay, how do I help people perform at the highest level as quickly as possible? And I would have said, oh, strength conditioning, nutrition, all those things. Well, when I realized the answer is actually probably sleep, that's what really drove me that direction.
And would have been like some of the biggest like things you've learned in all of your research on sleep that even like surprised you, somebody who was super passionate about it?
I think I used to associate sleep with energy and a feeling of awakeness and not being tired. And it's really a reset for the brain. So I think the biggest impacts of sleep are things we can't even recognize. They're just happening. So when you look at things like injury rates, right? Like crazy differences in injury rates just based on the number of hours of sleep people are getting, not because they're tired, like that wouldn't make sense. Like it really is allowing your brain to react like subconsciously, these quick almost, microsecond reactions, even like from a swimming perspective, over a tenth of a second slower off the blocks when you're underslept. So I think the thing, the perception most people have and I have was this tired, energy related relationship with sleep. And really what it is optimizing your brain everywhere from reaction time to things you can't control to injury to your actual emotional regulation, how you communicate with people and how people, communicate with you and how you're actually able to relay information, which is extremely powerful from a leadership perspective. You know, the foundation of any organization is trust, and trust comes from clear, consistent communication. And when you're underslept, you don't even realize you're not able to communicate your thoughts as efficiently. And so I think people don't even like put that in the sleep umbrella at all. That's almost like a whole different thing. And I also think people think they can out tough that and they can learn to be a better speaker and be intentional and, dial themselves in. But they, you can't out tough lack of sleep, and your brain's going to make up for it somewhere.
Are you familiar with Dr. Gina Poe? Her work? Yes. So I had her on the podcast. I don't know if it was a couple years ago, last year, I forget, but she's out of UCLA as well. And I remember, I didn't understand what each sleep cycle like did, for different mechanisms of the body, and I was like super blown away. Because I was like, oh, like the only sleep cycle I know is like deep sleep. REM sleep is where you have can have crazy dreams or whatever. But talk about like the importance of going through each sleep cycle and why people should actually pay attention to that.
Yeah, I think with this, the sleep cycles are becoming more aware, right? People are like aware of okay, there's these different cycles and they have different purposes, and some are more important. And I think, especially look at Whoop or deep sleep is a real focus. But I think the biggest takeaway with sleep cycles is consistency is king, right? When it comes to sleep cycles, it's more about the proportions of the cycles you're getting, making sure you're going through all these cycles, not like one is more important, right? So when you're looking at your deep sleep or your REM sleep and you're like, oh, I want to get more REM sleep or deep sleep, your body adjusts to what it needs. Like if you're higher anxiety, it will get more REM sleep. If you work out super hard, it'll get more deep sleep. So it's more about how do I set up a consistent routine, because that's going to allow the right proportions of all these different sleeps. And the reason, and the way I say that is, or the reason I say that is, you've heard of circadian rhythm, right? It's kind of like our body's relationship with timing. And so we have these different sleep cycles. You have your stage one, your lighter stage of sleep, your deep sleep, and your REM sleep. So think about it as your deep sleep or your non-REM sleep. Deep sleep is one, non-REM and REM. And then your REM sleep is like your emotional regulation sleep, kind of like a mental reset. You get the majority of your non-REM sleep the first half of the night, so that deeper sleep. You get the majority of REM sleep later in the night, the second half of the night. But the problem is when those cycles start, that's dictated on your normal bedtime and wake time. And so if you go to bed later, you stay up a couple hours extra, you don't start in that non-REM and deep sleep and then gradually get into REM. You jump right into those REM cycles faster. You basically cut off that deep sleep because you're used to being asleep at that time. And vice versa, you wake up early, now you're cutting off your REM cycles and you're getting majority of non-REM sleep, that deep sleep. So the problem is, it's like if you're not consistent with what time you wake up and go to bed, you're chopping off some sort of sleep cycle that you're not going to make up for because your body stays regular to your normal times. And I think that's where people mess up, is they think that like, oh, it's okay, I got this much REM sleep. Well, you might have chopped off most of your deep sleep, and they all serve different purposes. They all have different things, and one's not better than the other. People always talk about these different types, and I always compare it to a band, right? So it's like if you have a band, let's say a rock band, like if you have a guitar and a drum, the drum isn't better than the guitar. Like if the guitar player sucks and you try to make up for it with drums, that doesn't work, and vice versa. If the drum's really bad, you can't really make up for it with guitar. That's kind of the same as sleep cycles. Like you can't make up for lack of REM sleep with deep sleep. You can't make up for deep sleep with lack of REM sleep. They're totally different. They're different functions in the body, and they have different purposes. And really, the only true way to optimize your sleep is just be consistent. And that's like the number one rule. If you can stay within an hour of your wake time and bedtime, 7 days a week, you're going to be in a really great place as far as sleep cycles go.
So like the top golden rule you would say for sleep is to like optimize that circadian rhythm and make sure that you're going to bed and waking up at the same time, roughly.
Yeah. I mean,
Like
I
if
don't
nothing
think
else,
there's
nail that,
I don't
right?
think there's anything close to the consistency of your bedtime and wake time. Like I think everything else is a cherry on top.
Are there any other like small, I guess, like hacks, if you will, that you think people should try to do as far as like temperature in their room, like lighting, stuff like that?
Yeah, temperature. Like a lot of this stuff has been talked about, I think, but like the cold dark room. Obviously, you want to give your body the ability to cool off. Blackout. The less light, the better. One thing I think that's relatively new that hasn't been talked about a ton is I think screens are pretty demonized, right? Like you would say, no, no screens before bed, blue light, all this other stuff, which I agree with to an extent. But what we're learning more and more is actually the content and what you're consuming might be even more powerful. And that's been a shift. And so thinking about, they're at, everyone turns on The Office or Friends at night or whatever. And like, there's actually some science to that where a lot of times you associate those with relaxation. You don't have to really pay attention. You kind of already know what happens. So it actually does calm people down. They fall asleep faster. So it's not as much about the screens. It's like if you're watching Yellowstone, people are, stressed out and getting killed the entire time. That might actually keep you up more than might not be the screen. It might be the actual content you're consuming. So I think when you're winding down, thinking about, okay, like what am I watching? How does it impact me? Am I relaxed? Is it stressful? Because the more and more we're finding, the more engaged you are and the more intense, the more intense the content, the more impacts your sleep.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a difference between watching like late night news and like watching like a comedy show or something. One of them is going to hype up your stress levels. The other one's going to, hopefully make you smile a bit. What about like you talked about hydration being something that gets overlooked at the beginning? Um, Obviously hydration is incredibly important, and a lot of times people are super busy throughout the day, and even me, I'm like, crap, I haven't drank a lot of water. So 8 o'clock rolls around, I'm like chugging water, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, but that can disrupt sleep because now you're getting up in the middle of the night to have to go to the bathroom. um, how do you optimize hydration like throughout the day to make sure you're prepping yourself for a good night's sleep?
The goal is really to front load it. So if you can get over half of it before noon, that's a pretty good place to start. It's a little overwhelming, but I think that starting your day with some water is a great place to start. That already gets you ahead of the curve. But I love like the 3-2-1 rule. It's like uh, no food 3 hours before bed, no liquid 2 hours, no screen 1 hour. That's kind of like a good 3-2-1 rule. But really like a slow taper. So, if you start off early and hopefully you're exercising or something throughout the day, but, you started the day off with water and then you continue to kind of front load your hydration, maybe close to 100 ounces if you can, before noon or 1 o'clock. And then you slowly taper it off to where the evening time, you're having pretty minimal, you're having some obviously with your meal and just to stay, like you're not thirsty, but hopefully you have enough earlier in the day and you'll be shocked at how much less you wake up. Like if you think about when you wake up in the middle of the night, at least from my own experience, if I'm waking up 3 times, it's because I have to go pee 3 times. Like pretty much, I rarely wake up and just sit there for no reason and woke up. So a lot of times that's really impactful for people falling or staying asleep the entire night. And then the other thing is, I think that everyone goes through bouts of anxiety and not being able to fall back asleep. Anxiety peaks at night. That's normal. So it's not rare that people can't fall back asleep. And that's probably the question I get the most often. And the way I like to think of it is like, okay, the hydration thing, every time you wake up in the middle of the night, life's hard. There's a lot going on. There's a chance that you could think of something, not be able to fall back asleep, right? There's a chance you might walk to the bathroom, stub your toe, and be up the rest of the night too, right? So think of every time you wake up, there's a possibility, even if it's 1%, that you can't fall back asleep. So in my head, I'm like, well, let's minimize the chances that happens, right? So like let's do everything in our power to wake up the least amount possible, because that just opens ourselves up to the opportunity that we can't fall back asleep. And I think hydration kind of falls in that category. The other things that fall in that category are things like a white noise machine or earplugs. When you think about white noise, it doesn't make your sleep better. So like if you're someone that it's silent in your house and you just add in white noise, it's not going to help really. But what it can do is if there's sound disturbances or you're traveling, it can be really useful to drown out other noises. So think about what are the things that could wake you up, and let's eliminate as many of those issues you can that are in your control as possible. Because waking up in the middle of the night is, the thing we're trying to avoid, especially if you're having trouble falling back asleep.
One of the things that surprised me in learning about what disturbs sleep, which makes sense, but you don't really think about it, is like pets. And like, pets can be like one of the most comforting things for people. They say a lot of dog is a man's best friend. And
I mean, people who have their dog sleep with them, which I'm one of them. Luckily, she's like this big, but like, I mean, that is a non-negotiable for people. So like, I mean, I could tell everything, all the science of how bad it is, and people aren't going to care.
yeah, I know.
But it definitely a thing, especially like I mean, my cousin has like two giant dogs that sleep with him. I'm like, first off, I know those dogs are moving around. Every time those dogs move, you're definitely waking up. That they're massive. And so it's definitely something to think about. Memory foam mattress, though, super underrated sleep tool for that reason. Like, even if you just have a partner and they're getting up to go to the bathroom, well, if you're each getting up two times and you have like a spring mattress that transfers a bunch of force, all of a sudden you're waking up four times, right? Two goes to four. And so memory foam mattress can be an incredible tool just because, you don't realize, those old commercials with like the you drop the bowling ball and like the bowling pins wouldn't move on the other side. It's a real thing. And so I think that's people don't really talk about that anymore, but I love a memory foam mattress for that reason.
This episode is brought to you by Live On Labs. If you are someone who is constantly stressed, feeling depleted, and exhausted, I have some exciting news. My friends at Live On Labs have an incredible deal I can offer you. When you buy any product at full price, you get a free carton of their highly popular B complex product, which I take every day. Taking a B complex supplement can also help support things like a healthy metabolism, increased energy, blood sugar balance, and learning. Vitamin B supplements can help replenish nutrients depleted from stress. Live On Labs puts years of research into each product, which is why I stand behind them. Using liposome encapsulation technology, these products promote elite absorption so the supplements get into your cells and give you the best benefits that you're looking for. Right now, you can get a free carton of Lipospheric B Complex Plus, which is a $56 value with any full price purchase from liveonlabs.com. This supplement has the B vitamins and minerals that you need to help turn food into sustained natural energy throughout the day. Just add B Complex Plus and any other full price supplement to your cart and enter code BOPES24 at checkout to get this amazing deal. Now back to the show. Yeah, I think that people they just don't think about this stuff, right? Like, yeah, I'm one of these people that, well, my fiance and I got a kitten, and when we got the kitten, I already had my dog, and I was like, it was like sleeping in the room, and it was like jumping on me in the middle of the night. It was like nibbling at me, and I'm like, all right, this he cannot he cannot sleep in our room. Like I'm all cool, I'm all for like if he can just chill, but like if he's jumping on me, like and I'm a kind of a lighter sleeper, it's like the worst. So we've had to adapt with that, but it's also like I think there's certain things, and I don't have kids, and yeah, if it happens, later on in life, it does. But like, I guess it was getting me ready for what it's like to have like a kid in a way, right? And you can't really get around like, I mean, as you can't be like, yeah, I'm just not going to get up
So
when
I
my
actually don't
baby's
have kids
screaming.
yet. We're working on it. So we're like about to go through the IVF process, and I'm not gonna lie, that makes me nervous. Like the sleep aspect of having kids makes me nervous because it's an unavoidable it's an unavoidable sleep challenge, and there's not really I mean there's things you can do, but it's going to be tough. I'm also I'm 36, so I think most we were wired to have kids a little earlier in life, so it's going to be hard, and luckily I have support around us. But I actually like veer away from giving sleep advice to parents that much, and I've read a ton about everything, and I think I do every once in a while, but I'm actually like holding back because I want to experience it and like be able to speak first person on what it was like, and actually probably would change my thought on the things I would recommend, the things that actually work after I go through it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would love to like hear your thoughts on that because, I mean, I've heard from, it's like I remember and you were in the strength and conditioning world, so you kind of get this. Like a lot of my clientele was like general population parents, and at the beginning of my career as a trainer, I was always like, I don't care how busy you are with like your 9 kids, like fit in like 5 days a week of exercise and all your food. And then the older I got and the more people I spent time around, I was like, man, I was like such a millet. I was so bad. I was actually like inhibiting these people because I didn't understand that like they have to be able to like, I didn't have kids. So they probably were looking at me like being like, you have no idea what I'm going through. And B, it's like, you have to figure out where you can insert that into your own life.
I mean, it is a good snapshot though of like some people, when people have kids and they feel so bad, right? Like because they're not sleeping good. some people are living in their life that way, and it is a snapshot of what it looks like. And the extreme side, not to be sleeping well, and I think it's really telling. And I think, but the other thing is that people, the human body is extremely adaptable, and that's what happens when people are chronically underslept is they don't realize how bad they feel. And they've actually done studies like to support this, where they have people do cognitive testing, and the longer they're underslept, the less they realize how bad they're doing on the testing. So they start to believe they're doing good, and you just lose sight of like what it could be and what your peak performance used to be. And so what happens is people are chronically underslept, and they think they're fine. Like they think they're good with 6 hours because that's how they always felt. But really what happens is your brain just loses perspective of your performance levels, which makes sense because we're going to adapt, right? So if you can only get 6 hours, your brain, why would we continue to feel like we're not optimal? It's going to adapt and move forward, and just that's what we can get. But performance also continues to get worse and worse the more you're underslept. So you think you're doing better and better, or not better and better, you're doing normal, but your performance continues to drop. I don't think people quite realize how used to being underslept they are. Like there's a huge chunk of the population that has been underslept for decades.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and then you talked about like communication, logical thinking earlier. You hear a lot about like blood sugar regulation as far as when you have, poor sleep. Like what are some of the other like dangers that could potentially happen if people were, chronically sleep deprived?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is when you look at neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia and the links between those two things. And so we were talking about deep sleep cycles, and during that deep sleep cycle in 2019, they did the first live MRI, meaning like a video MRI, and they did an MRI of a brain, and they found that in that cycle, there was actually this fluid, cerebral spinal fluid. So it's like lymphatic fluid that literally like pumps through the brain and flushes out all that beta amyloids and those tau proteins, things that clump up and cause basically these signals in our brain to be impacted, and that's what caused neurodegenerative disease over time. And so when I think about just from a personal perspective, one, witnessing people go through those, it's horrible. And two, like my biggest fear is having to go through something like that, and people around me having to go through something like that. And when there's such close ties to sleep in that specific function in the body, it's just something that I think people really need to recognize and realize. One, the good thing is like a lot of the studies on those diseases, it seems like a lot of the environmental factors play a role, which is a great thing because that means if you make some changes and you can have an impact. What's scary is when when you look at something like, when I think of like ALS, it seems that it's a little mysterious and we have a hard time really pinpointing what's going on. Well, with some of these neurodegenerative diseases, which are, very scary, a lot of these environmental factors play a role, which is actually really positive because it means if we start changing some of these things, educating people start picking up early habits in their life, they'll be in a good place. I think we're starting to see that. There's more 21-year-olds now not drinking than in the last 100 years, I think they said.
That's wild, and it's funny. That's what I wanted to talk about. Like next is speaking of habits and normalizing things. Like, a lot of times you hear people say, "Oh, I'm able to sleep better when I." People will say, "I'm able to sleep better when I drink," or alcohol helps me calm down. And obviously, we've seen over the last few years from people like yourself, Huberman, the Surgeon General came out like I think it was a few weeks ago and talked about like the risks of alcohol for a variety of health things. Like what is the risk you take when you're having a couple of drinks every night before you go to bed?
Yeah, I think it's I think we're yet to see like the impact of this, but I do think things are changing. But alcohol causes 7 types of cancer. Like it's proven carcinogen, and that's not really up for debate. So like you're taking that risk. And what's interesting is I think with cigarettes, it's like people really, from a social perspective, just took a hard left. Like people are not, cigarettes have become not a cool thing. Um, but alcohol would be put in the same category, and it's still super socially acceptable. But I think we're starting to see that shift. So I would assume, based on what I'm seeing, the trends and the numbers, the data coming out, like in the next 20 years, I think we're going to see some massive changes in that industry. I think it's going to become much less of like a social norm, especially like the amount it's happening. But I think the risks beyond the cancer risks, I think when you're also putting at risk like your sleep. And I think that poor sleep unveils a whole another set of risks that actually aren't coupled with alcohol per se. And uh, mostly looking at those neurodegenerative diseases, right? Because what alcohol does is one, it does sedate you. So when people say I sleep better, I mean, I get why they feel that way because you fall asleep faster. The other thing that happens is the way alcohol impacts you. You have pretty segmented sleep. Like you have a lot of disturbances, but oftentimes you don't remember any of those disturbances, the way it impacts your brain. And then the other thing it does is it basically delays your REM sleep. So when alcohol is processing through your body almost has no REM sleep. And then once it metabolizes it, closer to the morning, you had no REM sleep. So your brain's like, I need to make up for this REM sleep. And it starts to just go into overdrive. And so people normally wake up in these REM cycles, they're thinking, oh man, I was having dreams. I slept great. I was out cold. Well, it's like, no, that's just the impact of the alcohol, and your body's trying to make up for like the disturbances and changes in your sleep cycles. And so it's giving you the illusion because, well, think about it. You woke up or you fall asleep faster and you didn't feel like you woke up as often, which isn't necessarily true, but and then you woke up in this crazy deep REM cycle. It makes sense why that's the misconception. But when you look at the sleep quality, that's probably the biggest. Like when people get an Aura Ring or a Whoop and they have a couple of drinks and they look at the stats, I think that's the most eye-opening thing for people in their sleep. People are like, whoa, they'll have two glasses of wine and your recovery is tanked. That's not by mistake.
Yeah, I think like cigarettes, people like took a hard left at that. Now you're seeing the same thing, like you said, with alcohol. I think, and I actually did like an 8-part series on the pod. I think it's been, was it last
Did you say
year?
8-part?
8-part series on on weed, like THC.
That's a long series.
Yeah, because I mean, I was interested in how like THC impacts mental health because I saw so much content online about people, I'm smoking weed and it's helping me with my anxiety and my sleep, and yet like as a trainer and a coach, some of the people that I trained were these young men and they were like having like these crazy, they were like in the psych ward and going to rehab for weed, which was like unheard of when you and I were kids, right? And so I was like, what's the disconnect between the information I'm seeing online and the science? And so interviewed Dr. Anna Lemke from Stanford, interviewed the deputy director of NIDA and of NIDA from NIH, interviewed the chair of psychiatry from Yale, and other experts who did like research on this stuff to like figure out like what's the data say about weed. And there was essentially, like, from what I understood, like zero benefit from a
Yeah,
mental
I
health
mean,
perspective. And I'm not talking about CBD or medical marijuana. I'm talking about like like just weed and edibles and stuff like that.
I struggle with the because I get asked this a lot, especially with college teams I go talk to, and there was this kind of like movement in the world where I think people were trying to get it legalized, and the whole legal and the judicial side, that's a whole different conversation. People, how they get in trouble, that's not what I'm talking about. But I think that they push this movement of how it can help people, and like it became this like weed is this super healthy thing and it's good for you. And I was like, well, let's hold on a second. Like the long-term brain scans of like chronic THC users are not good. Like the white matter, some of the white matter and gray matter in the brain is just like whoa. And so yeah, same with we THC is kind of weird with sleep too. Like it, no, I mean it's not good. It's similar, to alcohol in the way that impacts it. But it's weird because it seems like if you only use it like one or two times and you're not a chronic user, people actually sleep really well. Like, but it's like sparing. So that's interesting because it's not like it seems to change the impacts. Depending on how chronic the user is. Nicotine is weird like that too, where it's like a stimulant at a low dose and can be like sedating at a higher dose for some people, and that's nicotine's crazy too. The social side, like the Zen movement, is insane.
Zen vaping, it's like you don't even you don't even really know, like, I mean, we haven't even seen like the downstream effects of that either, right?
I'm definitely more bullish on nicotine, like pure nicotine, than all those other things. But yeah, it's been. I mean, the doses and people are doing it now are getting pretty crazy.
Well, that's what's different, I think, between like vaping and cigarettes. Like I smoked cigarettes when I was younger, and you would have a cigarette maybe like once every few hours or whatever, or once an hour. I mean, depending on how much.
They're just ripping vapes like all day.
Yeah, all day they have this thing in their hand. They're just ripping it like, oh,
It's almost like a tick, like not, it's like it's just constant. Well, that's the thing with the nicotine. That's what I'm curious because I do like 2 milligram Nicorette, which is the lowest dose you can get, and it's sparing because I want to, like, if I need it, I want to have something that kind of, will give me a boost, especially if I'm trying to like type something. And so I'm interested because, I mean, people are doing 12, 20, 30 milligrams at a time. And when you think about like the impacts just systemically across the body, other than just that, like what normally is done, I don't know if we have enough data to see how that's going to look.
yeah, I mean, we'll see, right? I mean, there's a lot to be learned. I mean, yeah, but I totally agree with you about like what you said about weed. And I think there's a difference, I'm all for like not locking people up for possession of weed. And there's a difference between the decriminalization and like legalization. They're two different things, right?
And I don't
But
care if people do it. It's just, but let's not, I mean, it's not act like it's good for you, like if you enjoy it, go for it. Like do your thing. I don't care, but like it's especially like the everyday thing, not good.
right, yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like you can don't judge anybody for what they do, but don't put the message online that it's good for
Yeah, it's like alcohol. It's like you don't want to drink alcohol every day. It's
you.
like,
Yeah. Kind of, and then going back to like, your work and what we've been talking about, you obviously started Dream Recovery. Mouth taping has become incredibly popular over the last couple of years. I think specifically, in my understanding, what really sparked it was James Nestor's book, Breath, which opened up the eye. I mean, it was one of the,
I mean, that made me try it for the first time.
yeah, and he's been on the podcast. And I was like so fascinated where he did that experiment where he had people just like mouth breathe and like how much their health that was it was hard to believe. I was like, this is insane. There's no way this is true. um Talk about like the research behind mouth breathing, and then kind of like maybe that leads into you talking about mouth taping and why you started Dream Recovery.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Well, like he talks about in the book, it's actually been relatively difficult to do like pure mouth breathing research because when they force people to mouth breathe, really bad things happen, and they had to stop some of the studies. But so I guess what we tend to do is lean more into the positives of the nasal breathing. But I think it's super simple, and it does make a lot of sense, especially if you look at the animal world. It's just we're meant to breathe through our nose at rest. Every single animal at rest is breathing through their nose, and it makes sense. That's like a direct tie to our nervous system, and I think that's the piece that I believe is really powerful. And there's some ancillary stuff with nasal breathing, but I think that the regulation of our nervous system, along with like filtering of the air, warming of the air, our oral microbiome, microbiome has become this insane big topic. And it's a little mysterious because, all right, we know this has a big impact. It's really important. It plays a huge role. Don't have the best handle on how to make an impact or change things, but we know it can. And so I don't think we think about that starting at the mouth. And when your mouth is chronically open, disrupts the natural bacteria growth. You're talking about super acidic saliva in your mouth, deterioration of teeth. But in general, it really is. It's like an optimizer for your health, right? It's one of those things where it's either making you better or worse. And a lot of people are able to breathe through their nose without any assistance. But for the people that have struggles, I think that's the piece too. We're really finding out a lot has changed over the last 10 years of why people breathe through their mouth. But we do know, you want to breathe through your nose unless you're eating or talking or doing, zone 5, zone 4 exercise. And there's a ton of positive health benefits from that. But I think the biggest is actually the regulation of your nervous system. Stress is the foundation of all disease to some extent. And I think when you're chronically mouth breathing, it's like that is a low level of chronic stress for one system to the other, depending on why you do it. And so that's kind of where all the taping came from, is just, okay, look at all these positives from nasal breathing. Look what happens when we breathe out of our mouth. Seems to be difficult for people to do, especially at night, right? You can't be actively making yourself breathe out of your nose. And so, when people have issues that they struggle breathing through their nose, and all of a sudden they're breathing correctly, big changes happen. And you'd be shocked at a lot of the research done with mouth taping in particular is not awesome. I think because just nothing's been done that I think to set up in a way that's really uh, representative of the people that are doing it. You know, we're talking about someone probably like you or me that's trying to go from 80 to 100, and it seems like those people have amazing results, and we just have like so many people reaching out with the similar things. Like I had a friend that was Rebecca Rouse. She's like third in the nation in weightlifting. Just honestly, the most dialed in person I've ever met. Doesn't drink, sleep, nutrition, training. Like I've never met anyone like her. And she started taping, and I mean, like her sleep scores were unbelievable to change. And I was actually nervous because this is when we first started to send it to her because I'm like, there's no way this actually helps because she's like sleeping so well. So there's definitely something there. And I think it is like, it's that passive form of optimizing your breathing. I think a majority of people don't want to, or they can't, or they don't want to put the effort in to really doing breathing protocols. And for decades, people have been preaching how powerful breathing is. And it's just a passive way to do that. It's an easy way to do it that doesn't take any thought or effort, and just put it on there and kind of let your body do its thing. And I think that's why it's become so popular. It's just like it wouldn't get that popular if people didn't feel substantially better. The last thing I wanted to do was put tape over my mouth every single night, right? Like it would definitely would work if I'm going to do that every single night. And I think we're now fighting the battle of like the marketing. Like, you know, anytime money is to be made, there's going to be some crazy marketing and people trying to, you know, communicate messages just to get a quick buck. So we're always fighting that. But, you know, there's this stuff that the reason why we came out with it are grounded in science to the core. And, you know, you'll see a reflection of that. And just most people's sleep scores, especially that don't have something clinical going on.
Like, what are some small steps people can take to like become better nostril breathers in the meantime?
Well, I mean, I think awareness during the day. I mean, we've seen a lot of people that actually have trained themselves not to have to use the tape, but you know, when you're just walking around, I think the first step is always awareness when you're trying to make changes. And it's not for lack of ability. You know, a lot of people can breathe through their nose. So I think when you're doing zone two, walking, doing those things, start to think about your breath and think about how you're breathing. Think about if you're actually able to utilize your nasal breathing. So sometimes that actually is there's structural issues, or you could have deviated septum, all different things. I mean, I've broken my nose a couple of times, so I got all sorts of things going on. But if it looks like the camera's off centered, it's just my nose. Don't worry. And so, yeah, I think awareness. I think like anything, like bringing awareness to your breath, realizing you're able to breathe through your mouth, and then start thinking about how you are breathing throughout these different exercises. And the other thing is in the morning, like if you wake up and have a really dry mouth, that's a pretty good indication you've been breathing through your mouth the entire night. I did that my whole life, but I never even thought about it because I just thought that's how you woke up. You know, I didn't think twice. And so I think it's hard to have perspective. You don't have perspective change with your sleep and your breathing very often. And I think that's why I felt so much better. And so, yeah, I would just say start thinking about it, start being intentional, and think about how you're breathing in different spots of the day.
What's like one of the biggest like I guess like limiting beliefs you've heard with people when you're like, hey, try mouth tape at night? What is like one of the things they come back at you with as far as like an excuse or a fear?
Oh, everyone thinks they're going to suffocate for sure. That's by far the number one thing, and so that's why we have the Dream strips. The little like they're vertical strips. They're just a small piece of tape. They're also vertically stretchy. So not to get nerdy about tape, but most mouth tape is stretchy this way, two-way stretch. Ours is two-way, but it's vertical. So like it kind of clamps it where it's like a rubber band, and so you can like open your mouth. It'll just kind of give it a tug back down to close, and so. I mean, we came out that solely because every single person was like, "Am I going to suffocate?" But if you just like, we always recommend to just if you're on your couch watching TV, just close your mouth, and you'll prove to yourself very quickly that you're fine.
Well, Todd, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time, for coming on the pod. I think my audience is going to get a lot of value out of this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
You got it.